In accordance with Mark's emphasis on Jesus' miracles, chapter 2 opens with Jesus healing a paralytic whom he heals physically and spiritually. Jesus first heals the paralytic spiritually by saying, "My son, your sins are forgiven." In reference to St. Augustine, Hahn comments that by healing the spiritual sickness along with healing the man physically, Jesus taught that spiritual illness is much graver than physical illness. As Benedict XVI explains, and I quote, "Man is a relational being, and if his first fundamental relationship is disturbed, his relationship with God, then nothing else can be truly in order." This is where the priority lies in Jesus' message and ministry. Before all else, he wants to point man towards the essence of his malady, his sickness, and to show him, if you are not healed there, then however many good things you may find, you are not truly healed. Even though Christians have the benefit of this teaching of Jesus, we still err, states Hahn, by praying that God deliver us from suffering, not deliver us from evil. Jesus' action of forgiving sin causes the scribes to object. What does this man speak? Why does this man speak thus? It is blasphemy. Who can forgive sins but God alone? This divine claim of Jesus, writes Benedict XVI, I quote, is what leads to the Passion. The healing of the paralytic is followed by Mark's account of Jesus calling Matthew, whom Mark refers to as Levi the son of Alphaeus. After calling Matthew and Matthew becoming a disciple, Jesus eats in Matthew's home along with sinners and tax collectors, considered to be traitors who collaborated with the hated Roman occupiers. Pharisees and scribes viewed these actions of Jesus as violating laws in the Torah that safeguard Israelites' holiness by commanding Israel not to associate with evil people, so as not to become evil like the evil people. Jesus, though, repeatedly demonstrates that when he associates with those deemed wicked, and at times are actually wicked, he does not become wicked, but instead influences them to be transformed by his holiness that surpasses the holiness of separation which the Old Testament emphasizes. The holiness of Jesus entailed not separating himself from sinners, but rather going out to sinners and inviting them to elevate their lives by living a life of virtue dependent on the grace he offers. Some who witness this apparent reversal of the definition of holiness by not separating oneself from sinners, but reaching out to sinners, may, writes Petrie, have felt threatened by Jesus, and even pridefully envious of Jesus' freedom. The Old Testament holiness of quarantining Israel from the world, comments Hahn and Mitch, I quote, was an imperfect provisional stage, appropriate for a particular time in salvation history, and is at times still relevant to the extent we have not been sufficiently transformed by the transforming holiness of Jesus. When we are weak and likely to be unduly influenced by evil behavior, we are to separate ourselves from bad behavior. This divine pedagogy is similar to, explains Petrie, to parents who temporarily quarantine their children from their child's friends due to their child's tendency to be led by their friends into bad behavior, rather than resisting the bad behavior and leading their friends into better, good behavior. The quarantining of Israel from the Gentiles was not in the original plan of God. On Mount Sinai, God established Israel as his firstborn son and kingdom of priests. As firstborn son and as priests, Israel was given the sacred responsibility of leading the other nations as Israel's younger brothers and sisters to the one true God. However, After the Israelites had fallen twice into idolatry while traveling from Egypt to Canaan, comments Hahn and Mitch, in reference to Ezekiel, God gave the Israelites statutes that were not good and ordinances by which they could not have life. Ezekiel 20:25. These not good laws included separating themselves from, driving out, and even destroying the Gentiles, for Israel had repeatedly demonstrated that when relating to the Gentiles, instead of leading the Gentiles to the true God, the Israelites are led by the Gentiles to worship of false gods, including immediate hedonistic pleasures. In the second section, people ask Jesus why, unlike John's and the Pharisees' disciples, Jesus' disciples do not fast. Jesus responds with the question, can the wedding guests fast while the bridegroom is with them? With these words, Jesus identifies himself, writes Benedict XVI, I quote, as the bridegroom of God's promised marriage with his people. And by doing so, he mysteriously places his own existence, himself, within the mystery of God. This means that in Jesus, continues Benedict XVI, I quote, God and man become one, become a marriage, though this marriage, as Jesus subsequently points out, passes through the cross, through the taking away of the bridegroom. As applied to the Mass, comments Hahn, we fast in preparation for the Mass, but then in the Mass we feast, for the bridegroom is now with us, since in every Mass the heavenly liturgy presided by Jesus as the one high priest is united with the earthly liturgy. The reason why Fridays are traditionally fast and abstinence days is, comments Petrie, because Jesus was taken away from us on Good Friday, only to return gloriously triumphant on Easter Sunday. Chapter 2 concludes with Jesus speaking about the purpose of the Sabbath. This takes place in the context of Jesus on the Sabbath traveling with his disciples through grain fields and plucking ears of grain to eat. When the Pharisees object to Jesus and his disciples picking grain on the Sabbath, which is the day to refrain from working, Jesus responds, have you never read what David did when he was in need and was hungry, he and those who were with him? How he entered the house of God when Abiathar was high priest, and ate the bread of the presence, which is not lawful for any but the priest to eat, and also gave it to those who were with him. According to the first book of Samuel, however, Ahimelech was the high priest and not Abiathar. Abiathar was the son of Ahimelech. Why then did Mark record Jesus as stating that Abiathar was the high priest? Hahn explains this apparent discrepancy as follows. As high priest, Ahimelech may have invited his son to rule together with him, according to an accepted practice, as evident in Luke's Gospel, which identifies John the Baptist's proclamation as occurring in the time of the high priest of Annas and Caiaphas. After Ahimelech died, his son Abiathar became the high priest and served under King David, whom he betrayed by supporting Adonijah's attempt to become King David's successor, even though King David had promised to name Solomon as his successor. Solomon responds to this disloyalty by ending the priestly line of Abiathar and beginning a new one with Zadok. As Hahn explains, according to this train of events, Abiathar represents the end of an old order. Abiathar has inherited from his father Ahimelech, while Zadok, who anointed King Solomon, represents a whole new dynasty, new kingdom, new order. Quote from Hahn. Similarly, Jesus is beginning a kingdom that, although in continuity with the past kingdom of Israel, is also new with the new priesthood. And the king and priest of this new order is Jesus, who fulfills and surpasses King David and the priesthood of the kingdom of David represented by Abiathar. If, therefore, King David could eat the bread of presence without violation, then all the more so can Jesus rightly pluck ears of grain on the Sabbath without violating the Sabbath, for he is Lord even of the Sabbath, as Daniel's prophesied heavenly person that looks like a son of man.